the Netherlands. He studied developmental psychology at the University of Amsterdam, where he served as associate professor at the Graduate School of Teaching and Learning from 1979 to 2015. Since 2002, he has held the chair of education at the University for Humanistic Studies, focusing on moral education and citizenship education from a humanistic perspective. In 2019, he was appointed Emeritus Professor. Professor Emeritus distinguished career in citizenship education, moral development, teaches pedagogical professionalism, policy, and youth studies. His work has provided a strong foundation and humanist academic networks, notably the Education for Democratic Intercultural Citizenship, EDIC network, a collaboration among 8 European universities supported by the Erasmus program from 2013 to 2019, and the International Networks for Democratic Education, INDE, which linked 10 school university networks worldwide. Professor Emeritus is also the founder and editor of the influential book series, Moral Dilemma and Education, and sits at the editorial boards of several scholarly articles and book chapters. His academic work has reached audiences across Europe, the United States, Africa, Latin America, and Asia, and he has served as visiting professor at 12 universities worldwide. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you this, that his work has been translated into 8 other foreign languages. A book in Bahasa Indonesia, or the Indonesian language, was published in 2023, which is called Teori dan Praktik Pendidikan Kewarganegaraan, together with Dr. Samsuri from Universitas Negeri Yogyakarta. In recognition of his outstanding contributions, Professor Emeritus Fergeles has received numerous international honors, including the Kermaker Career Award in 2015 and book awards from the American Educational Research Association's Special Interest Group on Moral Development and Citizenship Education in 2020 and 2024. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Emeritus Dr. Will Vergeles to deliver his keynote address, Global and Local Influences on Moral and Citizenship Education, Enhancing Dialogue in Teaching and Learning. Prof, floor is over.
Thank you for this very nice introduction. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
And I'm very happy to be here. And thank you, Dr. Fischer, for inviting me to give this keynote today. And as you mentioned already, I've been attending several Apnme's, and I really like it. And it's also nice to see so many good friends of me in the audience, but also a lot of new people, and in particular, new young people. And that's very important for organizations like Apnme, and also AMI. So it's a pleasure to be here. And I want to tell a lot, so I hope that I don't want to speak too much. But we can start now, and this is the title. And in particular, I want to focusing on different levels of the curriculum, how that relates to moral and citizenship education. And I want to to argue why we need more dialogues in education and more democracy. I think I can make the joke. Last week, Trump was here in Malaysia. And now you have me here in Malaysia. And instead of blaming democracy, I want to support democracy today. Also very pleased by the introduction Lee Mao Sen wrote for this conference, when he was speaking also so much about we need democracy and moral and citizenship education. So I'll start now. So this is Utrecht University, old center of Utrecht, 17th century. And we built the building has been financed partly by the VOC. So by money that comes from here. Sorry for that. Okay. So my outline is these 5 topics. First about curriculum, then about different views and practices, moral and citizenship education we have at the moment in the world. And then, as last part, speak about dialogues in education. Okay. I really like this scheme. Many of my PhD students have been using this. And this is made by John Goodlad from the University of Washington in Seattle, already in 1979. And he distinguished 6 levels of the curriculum. The first one is the ideal curriculum. And these are the very nice ideas of governments, but also of philosophers and other people who speak about education. The second level is the formal level, the regulations, the books, the curriculum. So what the schools have to do. The third level is the interpreted level. Teachers always make an interpretation of the formal curriculum. That's normal. It's not that they are doing a bad job, but that's normal. When you are teaching, I think most of you are teaching, you also make some interpretation of the formal regulations that your university has. This is the interpreted level. The fourth one is the operational level. We all know you have nice intentions, nice plans, but the reality of the classroom can be different. So here we look at the operational level of what is really going on in the classroom. The fifth level is what students experience, what they take up in their mind, what they experience. But that can be different from what they learn, what they are affected. And in particular, if we're speaking about values, about attitudes, they can have other opinions than the teacher wants. So it's good to look at the different levels. Next one. And you can use different methods, some research methodologies at the different levels. The ideal level, particular document analysis and interviews. At the formal level, also document analysis. Like we yesterday had the presentation of Indonesia and the presentation of Yasmin Sim about policy in Singapore. So the formal level, you can do document analysis. The researcher. When we're speaking about moral and citizenship education, people are speaking about different activities. And I really want to emphasize a whole school approach, which includes different activities. That you have a special subject for moral and citizenship education. That the topic of moral education and citizenship is included all subjects. And now some students from Fisher behind it, they study physical education. Physical education is a very nice subject, I think, fair play, but also solidarity, but also autonomy. I really like football, and I'm always saying, when in football there's only solidarity, there will be no winner. So we also need some autonomy to dribble, to make some goals. So moral and citizenship education should be integrated in all subjects, but it also relates to the ways of learning. And in particular, what's called open classroom climate, in which there's a lot of dialogues. Research shows that it has a lot of influence on the moral development, citizenship development of people. The ways of learning and teaching is important, but also this culture. How students and teachers live and work together in school. So both the formal and informal organizations, relationships, they are important for moral and citizenship education. And last but not least, the linking of school and society. I know that many people, in particular Fisher, do a project on service learning, linking education and society. So linking school and society is also part of a whole school approach. Next one. Then about the concept of citizenship education. The concept has been changed. Originally, it was only on the political level, about politics. Nowadays, it's also about social and cultural life, about how to behave in society, how to relate to other people, what's important in our national culture. And recently, it even has been extended to nature, how we relate to nature. So this is what I call the deepening of the concept of citizenship. And the concept has also been broadening from the national focus, the original national focus, to the regional focus, like the European Union, but also here in Southeast Asia, ASEAN, and the Mercosur and Latin America. So regional identities also influencing citizenship. And many people, in particular related to UNESCO, are speaking about global citizenship. So it's not only the deepening of the concept, but also the broadening of the concept that has been changed. And in particular, the deepening of the concept makes the link between moral education and citizenship education much stronger. We have done a lot of research in the Netherlands with surveys, but also with interviews about what teachers find important pedagogical goals, goals related to moral education, goals related to citizenship education. And not only teachers, but also principals, students, and also parents. And in that research, we find 3 clusters of goals, aims. And the first one is related to adaptation to discipline. And theoretically, we can link that to the work of Durkheim sociology, and sociologists, but also to Licona. And then I mean the traditional way of character education. That's the first cluster of goals. Second cluster, focusing more on autonomy development and critical thinking. And we can link that in a theoretical way to the work of Derek Kohlberg on his work on moral reasoning and making people more autonomous thinking. And also the British sociologist Anthony Giddens on agency. And the third cluster is a more social orientation. And that is about care, about empathy, about social justice. And that can range from more psychological care to more political solidarity. And different names we can add to it. Now, Noddings about care, and Paulo Freire about social justice and solidarity. So we find these three clusters of goals. And then we go on and doing personalized factor analysis, and we find three groups of citizenship. Next one. You're doing good. Thanks. Three groups of citizenship, and we call them types of citizenship. The first one is an adapted citizenship, and that emphasizes discipline and the social orientation, particularly in their own community. This is a very specific type of citizenship. Second one is individualized citizenship, with a strong focus on autonomy, but with a weak social orientation. So more the, let's say, the liberal idea of citizenship. Personal identity is more important than the social orientation. And the third one is what we call the critical democratic citizenship. And that combines a focus on autonomy and on social concern. A person never is only one of the three. It's always a mix. Also, when you look at schools, it's always a mix. But during the years, it has been very helpful to use this distinction, speak with teachers about what they find important, to do research. We published this in the Cambridge Journal of Education. The three types of citizenship, they relate to different educational practices. The first one, more an adapted type of citizenship education, that suppose fixed values that are more traditional values, transmission of values. We're focusing on norms, how to behave. It's teacher directly. And this is very strong in education, in particular more traditional education. The second practice, individualized citizenship education, that focusing a lot on autonomy. And values are in a personal choice. It's presented not so much as an ideology, but more as a technical approach. It's focusing on independent learning, in which students study a lot for themselves and have a lot of choices. And this individualized citizenship education is very strongly hidden in the hidden curriculum. In particular, in the comparing of students. So each assessment is a kind of comparing. That really stimulates individualized citizenship education. You have to work for your own career, not for society. So this individual type. The third one, critical democratic, that's a combining of autonomy and social concern. And it's a joint deliberation of values. So more dialogues in the classroom. And it's a cooperative and inquiry-oriented teaching and learning. And many teachers say, we really like this, but it's very difficult to realize. And we all know from our own practice as teachers, it's not that easy to have this kind of education. Often education is like this. Just paraphrasing the idea of Paulo Freire of banking education, that you open the head, put knowledge in it, and then close the head again. So again, there are three different practices, but in reality they are mixed, of course. But it's good to make this distinction. Next one. We we also did research on global citizenship, and again we could find three types of citizenship, three types of global citizenship. And the first one is an open global citizenship. There's a neoliberal market ideology of openness, that you're open to the other world, open to business, open to present yourself in the global world. The second one is a moral global citizenship. It's about appreciating diversity. It's about enhancing humanity and taking care of the world. It's a moral call for a better world. That's particularly emphasized by Martha Nussbaum, by Amartya Sen from India, and David Hanson from Columbia University. But this moral global citizenship has been criticized recently from a more social-political perspective. Work from Chantal Mouffe, in particular, has been done this. And that means that the social-political global citizenship should challenge power relations and ask for social justice. This is more political than the moral global. This is Paulo Freire, but he should be more linked with this. Next one. We also made some small skills of citizenship related to the three types. You can find the items here. And we did a small research with my students in Utrecht and the students of Dr. Samsuri in Yogyakarta. And we couldn't find any differences for the open global citizenship. Neither we could find difference for moral global citizenship education. But a little bit to our surprise, we found differences for the social political. And the Indonesian students, they were more political engaged than the Dutch students. So the Indonesian said, I'm aware of social and political power relations in the global world. I want to strive for more equal social and political power in the global world. But I support the struggle of underprivileged people to gain more power. Indonesian students find these goals more important than the Dutch students. We were more focusing on the moral. But again, this is very helpful to think about what kind of global citizenship we are speaking about. And also to show that when people are using the word global citizenship or global citizenship education, it doesn't mean that we all have the same ideas about it. We also often many different ideas about it. Next one. I like this book. Been using also a lot. And it's the book of Joel Spring from New York City University from 2004. And the subtitle is How Education Ideology are Shaping Global Society. And he distinguishes three, in the beginning three and later on four, different ideologies who are influencing national policy. The first one is a nationalist ideology, and that's in particular about the own country, about the nation building. And Joel Spring is saying, and I agree with that, it's always good if nations have a kind of nationalist ideology in their citizenship education, but it should never be too strong. Then it becomes a nationalist citizenship education. So it's good to have attention for making a common language. And you know that there's a real issue in many Asian countries to define a common culture. So a nationalist approach is part of the policy, can be part of the policy. The second influence is what he calls calling for a global free market. And And that's more focusing on competition between countries, economic welfare, the technical advances. And that's in particular emphasized by the EMF and USO. They're emphasizing more that kind of citizenship, that kind of education, with all the testings, things, so on. The third ideology, that's what Spain called globalizing morality. That's about human rights, about democracy, and that's emphasizing in particular by UNESCO and by NGOs. And countries can have a different relationship with this more moral approach. And the fourth one is the environmental ideologies, and more recently, and particularly emphasized by NGOs. I also find this very helpful in thinking about education development. And Ivor Goodson, he said that there's a reflection. Each country make a reflection of this kind of ideologies. Next one. But also, I realized that when I was speaking about the spring book, it's real Western starting point and influence. And you also can speak about, and some people are doing that, about Asian values. In particular, the last decade of the 20th century, there was a lot of discussion about Asian values. Harmony, self-cultivation, and community. So I use this from the work of Wing On Lee. And Yasmin Sin from Singapore, she has an interesting article in, I think in 2014, about character education in Singapore relating to Asian values. So you also have this approach. And at this moment, we are finishing a special issue for the Journal of Moral Education on moral and citizenship education in Southeast Asia. I add that together with Manyao. A different approach to moral and citizenship education than the Western world. But we hope we can give a good presentation of it in the journal and have a lot of discussion about that. So this is okay. Now the third element of my talk is about the policy. And I did 2 studies on policy in the European Union on the request of the European Parliament. And we had to inquire how citizenship education and what they called common values have been introduced in different European countries. And these are some of the results. Just get a limited idea about democracy. Come back to that later on. There's an inward looking at national citizenship, the history, the culture. Also in the Netherlands, students don't learn that much about the VOC, what they all have done in these years, about our colonial period. It's changing a little bit, but it takes time. The global citizenship idea is more oriented to neoliberal competition instead of oriented to solidarity. And recently, culture and nature get more attention than social class and power relations. I can say that citizenship education becomes less political, but focusing more on culture and nature. I wrote an article in the journal Compare about this. And there's a lot of inequality. in the European Union, social class related, but also related to different cultural, ethnic and religious groups. And there is, coming back to the 6 different forms of curriculum, there's a big gap often between ideal and formal. I also wrote an article about it, the handbook, Moral Character Education, recently. So this is Europe. And this is a special issue we are making. And some of the general results, I can speak about it already now. In all the countries, there's quite a strong policy on moral and citizenship education. There's a lot of focusing on national traditions and national building. And the influence of religion is big in many countries. It can either be Confucianism, or the north of East Asia, or Islam in Malaysia or in Indonesia. And some of the countries are more mixed cultural, mixed religious approach. The attention for autonomy and democracy differs between the countries. Some countries are more paying attention to that than others. And there's quite a lot of attention for sustainability in the countries. So this is a general idea about what's coming out from the study we did for the Journal of Moral Education. Next one. I think many of you are familiar with the ICCS study. That's a study each 6 years, about 6 years, in about 25 countries. Most of them are from the European Union, about the effect of citizenship education. I'm in the advisory board, and we had recently had the results of the 2022 election survey, and they were not very good results. There's low knowledge politics about 14-year-old students. There's low trust in institutions and politicians, low engagement, participation, often negative attitudes towards immigrants, particularly in Northwestern Europe. There's a strong individual orientation of youngsters. There's support for sustainability, and that also shows other survey studies. They're quite positive about their peer group. And they are interested, they have a global interest, but not that very political. So you can say we haven't done a very good job yet. There's still a lot of work to do. And these, also in studies like the World Value Studies, quite similar results. Not so much knowledge, not so much engagement, and often strong negative attitudes towards migrants. I also want to speak a few words about artificial intelligence. I'm not an expert in that, and but we all are confronted with it. And recently I tried to. I went to ChatGPT and I asked them about me. Who is real Vögelers? And within a few minutes, they had a lot. They told me a lot about me, and so I was surprised by the speed and about how much knowledge they had. Most of that was from my CV, from my webpage, so that was not that difficult. But I was mostly surprised by the false mistakes they made. So they rightly mentioned that I was at give a lecture at Apnme in Taiwan and on Bali, several different Apnmes. But they also said that I had given a lecture in Bangkok. Never been in Bangkok. And the most funny thing was that you told already that I received twice a book award, the American Educational Research Association, in 2020 and 2024. And what they wrote that I received the book award in 2020 for the book that I only published in 23. so they mixed it. They mentioned only one award, but then they made the different combination. So we cannot trust the IE. It can be helpful, but we cannot trust. And so after this factual information, I asked them, is Bill Douglas a moral person? Maybe you have some idea about it. Yeah? And I was surprised by that too. ChatGPT said he wrote a lot about moral education, but I don't know if he is a moral person.
That's very honest.
Very honest. So I was happy with that. So yeah, that was funny. So, so we should that's not only for IE, but in general. Critical thinking is never a fully logical way of working. Moral values influence patients. We should be aware of that. So never speak about critical thinking, reflection, things like that in a neutral way. That's the first point. The second one, moral values, is normative decision making, are difficult to include in logarithms. You should be aware of that. And moral and citizenship development needs different perspectives, different dilemmas, needs controversial issues. The big tech could organize that. Now they're focusing more on keeping you in your bubble, but they could have an approach on focusing on diversity, different perspectives, dilemmas. So they can be more moral than they are doing now. And the author, they keep responsible. When students or academics are writing for the Journal of Moral Education, we're getting a lot of articles, and sometimes we find articles that have been using too much artificial intelligence. That they put references that have never been published. So we don't like that. You get a bad name if we find out. So try to avoid that. Use it as help, but you are responsible. Check everything twice. Many mistakes, gave already an example. And IELTS is a tool, very helpful, but I think it's overrated. Too much hype. Yeah, okay. Then about democracy. So when Trump became in office, and also with a lot of quite right-wing governments in Europe, also in the Netherlands, but last week we changed to a more liberal position. And what was interesting more in the concept of citizenship, the concept of democracy. So I formulated different foundations of democracy. And the first one is participation in social, cultural, and political life. So participation, being engaged. The second one is autonomy. For democracy, it's very important that people can formulate their own vision, their own ideas. Dus there must be freedom of speech. Of course, I don't say that people can say everything. But freedom of speech is very important. A third foundation of democracy, to say that dialogues, that people have dialogues with each others. And dialogues means in the sense of Paulo Freire and Hubert and Aloni, talks like that, is that people are open to listen to other people and also open to change their mind. The dialogue is not a discussion. Dialogue is trying to come together and learn from each other. The fourth one, that's really central for a democracy, is consensus building. Often majority, but also trying to make as best a good consensus. These four, you can find that a lot in Western democracies, but also to some outside the Western world, Latin America, and also here in Asia. But democracy can be made stronger by focusing explicitly on inclusion of marginalized people and immigrants. In many Western countries, you have this discussion when immigrants can get the full national status. Policy of social justice and equity, that democracy is not only a voting system, but also a system of change and making more equality, equity, and a global orientation. So I think we should, when we are speaking about democracy, we should focus on such foundations. That's right. Some of my concerns about moral citizenship education, particularly for the Western world, but also I think for the global world. There's a lot of distinction in societies and in education. In particular, in the northwestern part of Europe. There's a strong individual. Often people say moral education and citizenship education, it's for the people who are making trouble, who are not integrated. But I think we should also look at the elite, what kind of citizenship education they have, because they have more power. Don't say that they should have more power, but they have more power. And we should also work with them on citizenship education. Once on the school, gymnasium in the Netherlands, I had to give a lecture, and then one of the teachers said, we don't need citizenship education because we don't have immigrants in our school. And that's the only reason that you should have citizenship education. They never invited me again. So also the elite needs moral education. There is now a weak focus on democracy. I think we should speak more about democracy. There's a weak political participation of some groups. Social media. I wouldn't use the word fake news, but I would use other opinions. We shouldn't say too easily fake news. And in curriculum, there's not a good balance between focusing on the basics and on citizenship and morality. And interesting is the balance in policy between steering, giving autonomy to schools, teachers, and control. So there are real concerns. Still a lot to do for us. So 5 more minutes about what to do. And then I'm really emphasizing dialogue. First start with, what's my view on learning? It's more a social constructive view, inspired by the work of Vygotsky, Bruno, Helen Hayes. Social constructive view is Learning is a personal process of giving meaning, but never isolated, but always dialogical with people that are there, with the context, the resources you have. And then I come to three learning processes: reflective, dialogical, and democratic. The reflective learning is that you ask on students to articulate one's own interests, feelings, their own process of meaning making, the moral values, so that they can express and formulate their ideas. The second one is that you ask them to inquire their own identity development and reflect on their own learning process. And the third aspect of reflective learning is the regulation of the own learning process and taking autonomy, taking responsibility for it. This is quite, particularly in teacher education, this is quite popular, speaking in theorizing, not so much yet in practice. But this is not enough reflective learning. Therefore, I speak also about dialogical learning. That you communicate in an open way with other people. That you analyze and compare different perspectives. And that you analyze the social and cultural and political power relations involved. So dialogical. But this is also not enough. Therefore, I add democratic learning. We should teach students to learn being democratic, not only dialoguing, but also to make consensus, to learn, get agreements. They're open to joint building agreements, but still stand for their own opinion. And that they are involved in the process of building democracy as a permanent process. So these three types of education, I think we need more in schools. But not only in schools we should have dialogues, we should have dialogues on the different levels of the curriculum. In society and politics, it's very good if there's a lot of debate in society, in politics, about what is good moral education, what is good citizenship education. But that includes giving space to different voices, different perspectives, and get into open dialogues. But also try to reach consensus with respect for minorities. And this can also be a very good example for students if policy and politicians are working in this way. This is the policy level of citizenship education. Next one. And then we also should have dialogues between researchers, and organizations like Apnme are already a good example of it. And it's good to have the combination of different perspectives, a moral perspective, political perspective, the social justice perspective, multicultural perspective, the critical democratic perspective. It's good. We not all can do everything. So some are more focusing on the cultural perspective, and more on moral, and more on political. That's good. But we should try to bring together different perspectives and to get into dialogue. So we also have, as researchers, we have a task on dialogue. Next one. And then on the school level, in schools, teachers should discuss with each other about what is good moral and citizenship education. What are they doing in practice? To formulate a school vision and a plan to stimulate collaboration between teachers. But not only between teachers in the school, but also between schools. It's very good, in particular if there is a very segregated society, if schools are working together. I also did some work on networking between schools. And it's good to learn from differences. That you see that other schools are having another way of organizing education, other kind of teaching. It's good to see many different practices. It's also possible then to bridge for students from different backgrounds. And it's important to communicate with the community. For example, with the service learning projects. Next one. And then classroom aspect. So more real dialogues, which all students can participate. Often the teacher still too much directing the dialogues. More experience for students in democracy building. More active inclusion. Give more chances for students. Linking the local and the global. More inquiry and analysis of students on the foundations of democracy. And how society can be improved for one's own role, and it should be the purpose of education. Still quite a lot of challenges. Student experience, we really should take care of that. And one of the articles in our special issue shows very nice how students get very interesting ideas, not directly linked to the curriculum, but stimulated by the curriculum to think for themselves. So it's very good to do more research on the student experiences, qualitative observations. So attention for that process of giving meaning, the process of subjectification. And we should pay more attention to the emotions of students. And James Bank is saying citizenship education has a positive curriculum in many countries, but many students have negative experiences. We should be aware of that. Last one. So you can imagine we are bringing it all together. Next one. But under this, some other idea is that we should look for another kind of identity. And with Yasmin Sim, I'm having already talkings for over 10 years. And we always speak, we always say that the West should be less autonomous and more social, and the East should become more social, more autonomous and less social. So we should look for more what we can learn from the different identity developments. So we should link autonomy and social concern on a conceptual level also, but also when we are looking to people. And authentic means that you have space for pluralism and for the context. We should try to use more relational concepts, because that's more an expression of linking autonomy and the social concern. So about empowerment, about efficacy, I really like that word, agency, dialogical self, social self, that kind of words we should use more than ego, things like that. We really should work more on equality and equity. And we should try to develop an identity that combines authenticity, agency, engagement, social justice, moral and political, local and global, and with space, of course, for different articulations. So we still have something to do. Thank you for your attention. My latest book, an large review by David Hansen in Journal of Moral Education. My website, my email. And this is the book that I made together with Dr. Samsuri in Bahasa. Okay.
Thank you so much to Professor Emeritus Dr. Will Fergalus for his insights on moral and citizenship education, as well as how dialogues can enhance teaching and learning, and especially so from the Asian perspectives on citizenship education. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we now open to the question and answer session. Would anyone would like to ask a question to Professor Emeritus Dr. Will Fergalus? Yes, Mr. Aristotle.
Beautiful, with many ideas. I just question about consensus and the challenges of consensus, where how do minority or marginalized have be included when there's consensus? Because consensus normally we would be majority and take prominence.
Do you mean on the political level or on the school level, classroom level?
I think at all different levels, because when the idea of consensus seems to be that there is, you can say, a group thing, because everyone wants to conform to the group. Yeah.
Then you can say this kind of processes are everywhere in schools and in politics. And the literature has a lot of debate about this, about in particular with the work of Chantal Mouffe on agonism, and that Chantal Mouffe is saying that we should emphasize more the differences, more different ideas, and we should not make our adversaries enemies, but also not friends. So we should, in one way, respect their own position, try to include us as much as possible. And I was also a little bit doubting if I should use the word consensus. But consensus is a little bit to fade away all the differences. And it can either be a consensus for the majority, or it can be a consensus of so consensus is not a good word, but I still want to mention we should come to a kind of agreement, but of course respecting a lot minorities, and you have always the same majority. Thank you for the question, Monica.
Yes, Dr. Monica.
And I agree with much of what you say, because I've always been particularly interested in student voice and dialogue. A lot of the concepts I find generally that there's a kind of ignorance history. Talk right about things, if they're new, and they ignore that a lot of the already been said, published about it. For example, as you know, Chinese colleagues and I did a specialist with Jeremy 20 years ago about moral education changing Chinese societies. And me and him and another specialist at Apnme 10 years ago about this moral education region. So the question is partly about it's an old question, so I suppose it's partly about is there development in this area, specific area of our field, or is there really okay? And do you see any historical development? Because these are also important things to bear in mind. I think especially when, sorry, I think this is several aspects that you could choose, especially when we talk about the concepts that are in there in West about human voice and dialogue and promoting democracy. How do you actually do that in a society which is not democratic, as several in this region are not? Sorry, not fiction, but
Thank you, Monica, for your comments. And particularly, I like the point you made about formulating my own word, what's new or what are the developments. And I know your special issue with fun and other people and other publications, particularly the work of Kerry Kennedy. And and also what I see in general in the journal of moral education, that I think the last 10 years, the research in Asia on moral and citizenship education has become much better. And also, there's more a link between moral and citizenship education. And different research methodologies are used. And people are trying to combine different concepts. So I really see progress in that. So, and it's good that you asked for that. So this is also who and I, introduction, we will emphasize that. And there is much going on. Sometimes I think there's more going on here than in the Western world. So therefore, I also like this always to say that I learn a lot from people in the Eastern world, in other parts of the world. So, but you can see that many people are looking for combinations, not only using one certain type of ideology, but trying to combine things and making progress on that. And I'm also happy that Apnme plays a very central role in this.
Okay, we can have one last question. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Ishmiri. I'm a scholar from UM. Thank you very much for your insightful presentation of opinions and your ideas. Just as I was waiting for some important part, especially assessment. Since yesterday I was waiting, someone will give any ideas, opinions in this part, assessment part. Because I don't know about other countries, but in Malaysia, the assessment is more on paper. So if there's no assessment also, then this subject might seem as not important or can be neglected also in the future. So in Professor opinion, what kind of assessment is suitable? Since it's in an education part, we need the assessment also. whether we have to know the kids are already, as in the values, their values are already in their thoughts, they already pro in that subject or not, we need the assessment. But what kind of assessment can be suitable for this subject? It will be really appreciated. Dr. Professor can share what
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
I think the most important thing is that in schools, there's a culture in school, but also in the classroom, a culture in which people can express their ideas, their feelings, their emotions, in which they take each other seriously, in which they help each other, and in which they don't see each other as competitors, but as friends, as that culture is so important for moral and citizenship education. And to be, I like to ask when I was teaching student teachers, I like to ask always, what kind of teachers you really like? Which teachers have made an influence on your life? Why? So to inquire what are important people for them, what kind of persons, what kind of experience they find important for their own identity development. So that, of course, the subject is very important, and the subject should be speaking more about the world, not only our own history. And of course, we should learn a lot about politics. But that culture is also so important. I hope it helps a little bit. Okay.
All right, I think this is the end of a question and answer session. Because time do not permit us this time, so I will hand over this mic to Ms. Safia.